The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, crimson liquid spreading like blood across the white tiles. Minute who didn't flinch. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, watching Seoul's lights glitter below while his father's voice thundered through the phone. "You're a disgrace. Another scandal, another woman, another headline." Chairman Khan's words cut through the silence. "The board wants you removed. Do you understand? Your own company wants you gone." Minute who ended the call without responding. Behind him, the woman from last night, he couldn't remember her name, gathered her clothes with practiced efficiency. She knew the routine. They always did. He pulled out his wallet, counted bills without looking at her face, and placed them on the nightstand. The door clicked shut moments later, leaving him alone with the mess he'd made of his life. His reflection in the window showed a man who had everything and felt nothing. 28 years old, heir to a billion-dollar empire, and completely hollow inside. The playboy prince of Seoul, they called him. If only they knew the truth, that every meaningless encounter was just another attempt to forget the emptiness eating him from the inside out. Across the city, Aisha Daniels stared at her laptop screen, cursor blinking mockingly at the end of an unfinished sentence. Her protagonist was supposed to fall in love in this chapter, but the words wouldn't come. How could she write about passion when she'd never experienced it? How could she describe love's fire when she'd never felt its burn? "Girl, you're doing it again." Mina's voice burst through her laptop speakers during their video call. Her friend's face filled the screen, makeup flawless, excitement radiating. "You're overthinking. I'm a romance writer who's never been in a romance," Aisha said, pushing her braids back. "That's like being a chef who's never tasted food." Joy's face appeared in the split screen, grinning wickedly. "Then let's change that. Club Eclipse opens tonight. It's exclusive, expensive, and exactly what you need to get out of your head and into some real experiences." Aisha glanced around her small apartment, books stacked on every surface, her writing desk facing a window with a view of other apartments. Safe. Predictable. Boring. "I don't know. Clubs aren't really my thing." "Nothing is your thing except those books." Mina laughed. "Come on. One night. Live a little. How else are you going to write about that first kiss that makes your heroine's knees weak if you've never had one yourself?" The words stung because they were true. 26 years old and she'd built an entire career writing about experiences she'd only imagined. Maybe it was time to change that. "Fine. But just for a few hours. And if I hate it, we leave. Deal." Both friends squealed in unison before the call ended. Hours later, Aisha stood outside Club Eclipse, tugging at her simple black dress while a line of impossibly beautiful people waited behind velvet ropes. The bass thumped through the walls, vibrating in her chest. Mina and Joy flanked her, dressed to kill and radiating confidence Aisha had never possessed. Inside, the club was a sensory assault, neon lights painting everything in shades of blue and purple, bodies moving like a single organism on the dance floor, and music so loud she felt it in her bones. Mina pressed a cocktail into her hand, something pink and dangerous looking. "Relax." Joy shouted over the music. "You look like you're at a funeral." Aisha took a sip of the drink, then another. The alcohol burned, but it also quieted the anxious voice in her head. She let her friends pull her toward the dance floor, let the music move through her, let herself feel something other than the pressure of deadlines and blank pages. That's when she saw him. He stood in the VIP section above the main floor, separated from the crowd but somehow commanding attention without trying. Even from a distance, something about him pulled at her, the sharp line of his jaw, the way he held his whiskey glass like it was the only solid thing in a spinning world, the profound sadness in his eyes despite being surrounded by people. Their gazes met across the chaos, and time seemed to slow. The music faded to background noise. The crowd disappeared. There was only him, looking at her like she was the first real thing he'd seen in years. Minute who felt it like a punch to the chest. She didn't belong here, that much was obvious from her uncertain posture and the way she clutched her drink. But there was something genuine in her face, something unguarded and true that made his carefully constructed walls crack. Another conquest. Tai Yang, his best friend and head of security, appeared beside him. "She's pretty." Want me to send someone to bring her up? No. The word came out sharper than intended. Minute set down his glass and moved toward the stairs, driven by an impulse he didn't understand and didn't want to examine. Aisha watched him descend like a predator in designer clothing, all controlled grace and dangerous confidence. Her friends had vanished into the crowd, leaving her alone at the bar when he materialized beside her. You don't belong here, do you? His voice was smooth, cultured, with an edge of genuine curiosity. She should have been intimidated. Instead, liquid courage and something reckless inside her made her turn to face him fully. Neither do you. His eyebrows rose. What makes you say that? You're surrounded by people but completely alone. You're in the most exclusive club in Seoul but look like you'd rather be anywhere else. And you're talking to me instead of any of those women who've been trying to catch your attention all night. She gestured toward the VIP section where several models were watching them with obvious jealousy. A genuine smile broke across his face, transforming him from merely handsome to devastating. Observant. I'm a writer. It's my job to notice things. A writer. He moved closer, and she caught his scent, expensive cologne mixed with whiskey and something uniquely him. What do you write? Romance novels. The kind where the hero and heroine meet in dramatic circumstances and fall impossibly in love despite all odds. Sounds unrealistic. But his eyes said he wanted to believe it could be real. Maybe. But isn't that what makes it worth reading? The possibility that love can be extraordinary instead of ordinary? The alcohol was making her brave, philosophical, saying things she'd normally keep locked inside. I've never experienced extraordinary. Minute signaled the bartender for 2 drinks. Only expensive. Those aren't the same thing. Teach me the difference. The conversation flowed like they'd known each other for years instead of minutes. He told her about the pressure of expectations without revealing his identity, and she shared her dream of writing a bestseller that would make people believe in love again. They debated whether fate or choice mattered more, whether passion or stability made better foundations, whether people could truly change or were locked into who they'd always been. Hours passed like minutes. The drinks kept coming. And when he asked if she wanted to see the view from his penthouse, every rational thought in Aisha's head said no, but her heart, her foolish, romantic heart, whispered yes. The elevator ride was electric with tension. His hand found the small of her back, and she turned into him, drawn by forces she couldn't name and didn't want to resist. Their first kiss was explosive, all the loneliness and longing they'd both carried crystallizing into desperate need. They barely made it through his front door before clothes started falling away. Aisha's mind screamed that this was crazy, that she didn't even know his name, but her body had waited 26 years for this feeling and refused to listen to reason. Wait, Minute breathed against her neck as they stumbled toward his bedroom. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. A lie. But one she needed to believe. The night blurred into sensation, his hands learning her body, her gasps as he showed her pleasures she'd only written about, the brief sharp pain that made him pause until she pulled him closer, whispering that she wanted this, wanted him, wanted to finally understand what all her characters felt. When it was over, they lay tangled together, breathing hard, the city lights painting patterns across their skin. Aisha felt transformed, like she'd crossed some invisible threshold from girl to woman. Minute held her close, stroking her hair with a tenderness that contradicted his reputation, and for the first time in years, the emptiness inside him felt less vast. Stay, he whispered as her breathing evened into sleep. She murmured something he couldn't hear and burrowed deeper into his arms. Morning came too soon, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows without mercy. Aisha woke slowly, body aching in unfamiliar ways, memories of the night before flooding back in overwhelming detail. She turned her head and saw him, still asleep, beautiful in the morning light, looking younger and more vulnerable than the confident man from the club. Then she saw the blood on the sheets. Horror crashed through her. She'd been so caught up in the moment that she hadn't thought about practicalities, about protection, about consequences. She'd given her virginity to a stranger whose name she didn't even know, and the evidence of her inexperience was literally staining his expensive sheets. She needed to leave. Now. Before he woke up and saw her shame. Aisha slipped from the bed as carefully as possible, gathering her clothes scattered across the floor. Her hands shook as she dressed, and she kept glancing back at him, praying he'd stay asleep just a few more minutes. But as she reached for her purse, he stirred. Those dark eyes opened, focusing on her, then moving to the sheets. She watched his expression shift from sleepy contentment to shock. You were. He sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair. You were a virgin? The word hung between them like an accusation. Aisha wanted to melt into the floor. I need to go. Wait. He reached for her, but she was already moving toward the door. Let me at least call you a car. What's your name? It doesn't matter. She couldn't look at him, couldn't bear to see judgment or pity or worse, indifference in his eyes. This was a mistake. Aisha, please. She stopped at the sound of her name. She must have told him last night, but didn't turn around. Goodbye. The door closed behind her with terrible finality. She practically ran to the elevator, tears already streaming down her face. What had she done? She'd written dozens of love scenes, but reality was nothing like fiction. Reality was messy and painful and full of regret. Behind her, Minute sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the closed door, then at the evidence of what they'd shared. Something about her had reached past all his defenses, made him feel alive for the first time in years. And he'd taken something precious without even knowing it. What have I done? He whispered to the empty room. If you're captivated by this story, comment below with your thought. We're just getting started. The next month was hell for Aisha. She couldn't write, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything except that night and its possible consequences. When her period didn't come, she told herself it was stress. When the nausea started, she blamed bad food. But when the exhaustion became crushing and her breasts became tender, she couldn't deny reality anymore. 3 pregnancy tests sat on her bathroom counter, all showing the same devastating result. 2 pink lines. Positive. Pregnant. Aisha slid down the bathroom wall, sobbing into her hands. This couldn't be happening. She was supposed to write about unplanned pregnancies, not live through one. She was supposed to know her baby's father more than just biblically. She was supposed to be married, stable, ready. Oh God, she gasped between sobs. Oh God, oh God, oh God. Mina and Joy arrived within the hour, summoned by a frantic text. They sat on her bathroom floor, arms wrapped around her while she cried herself dry. You have to tell him, Mina said gently, stroking Aisha's braids. I don't even know his full name. I know he lives in that penthouse and I know he's rich and I know he made me feel things I've never felt before, but I don't know who he actually is. Joy pulled out her phone. Describe the building. Describe him. We'll figure it out. It took 2 hours of searching, but they found him. The penthouse in Gangnam belonged to one of Seoul's most exclusive buildings, and cross-referencing with gossip sites and business news brought them to a name and face that made Aisha's blood run cold. Khan Minute-Woo, heir to Khan Enterprises, one of the largest conglomerates in South Korea. Estimated net worth in the billions. Known playboy with a reputation for loving and leaving women. And if the whispered rumors were true, his family had connections to the Viper Syndicate, one of Asia's most dangerous crime organizations. I'm carrying the baby of a mafia prince, Aisha said faintly. That's not confirmed, Mina hedged. The syndicate stuff could just be rumors. Doesn't matter. Aisha stood, decision crystallizing. He needs to know. Whether he's mafia or just rich, whether he wants it or not, he needs to know he's going to be a father. But knowing what she had to do and finding the courage to do it were different things. It took 3 more days before Aisha stood outside Khan Enterprises headquarters, a glass tower that scraped the sky and probably cost more than her entire neighborhood. She'd dressed carefully, a modest dress, minimal makeup, trying to look respectable instead of desperate. The moment she entered the lobby, security descended. 2 men in sharp suits blocked her path. Do you have an appointment? One asked, polite but firm. No, but I need to see Khan Minute-Woo. It's urgent. Mr. Khan doesn't see anyone without an appointment. You can contact his office through the website. Khan Minute-Woo got me pregnant. The words burst out of her, louder than she intended. I need to see him now. The lobby fell silent. Dozens of heads turned. Phones appeared, recording her outburst. Aisha's face burned with humiliation, but she stood her ground. He needs to know. Please. Just let him know I'm here. High above in his corner office, Minute stood at his window, watching the commotion below. His assistant had alerted him immediately, and now he watched this woman, his woman. He recognized her even from this height, making a scene that would be all over social media within the hour. Sir, should we call the police? His assistant asked nervously. Minute's jaw clenched. Pregnant. She was pregnant. With his child. The realization hit him like a freight train, followed immediately by cold fear. If she was carrying his heir, she was a target. Every enemy he'd ever made would use her and the baby to get to him. No, he said quietly. Bring her up. Now. And have security confiscate every phone that recorded her. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The elevator ride felt eternal. Aisha's hands trembled as she clutched her purse, flanked by two stone-faced security guards who refused to meet her eyes. The numbers climbed higher and higher until they reached the top floor, the executive level where Korea's most powerful heirs made decisions that affected millions. The doors opened to reveal a reception area more luxurious than most people's homes. Marble floors, abstract art worth more than Aisha would earn in a lifetime, and a view of Seoul that made her dizzy. The receptionist, a woman with a face like carved ice, gestured toward massive double doors. Mr. Khan is waiting. Aisha's legs felt like water as she crossed the space. The doors opened automatically, revealing an office that could have housed her entire apartment 3 times over. And there he was, standing with his back to her, hands in his pockets, looking out at his kingdom. Close the doors, Minute said without turning. His voice was different from that night, cold, controlled, empty of the warmth she remembered. The doors clicked shut, leaving them alone. He finally turned to face her, and Aisha's breath caught. He was even more beautiful than she remembered, but now she saw him clearly, the designer suit that cost more than her yearly rent, the Rolex catching the light, the unmistakable aura of power and privilege. This wasn't the vulnerable man from the club. This was Khan Minute, and she'd been a fool to think that night meant anything to him. How much do you want? He asked flatly. Aisha blinked. What? How much money will it take for you to go away? To handle this problem quietly? He moved to his desk, pulled out a checkbook that probably had more zeros than she'd ever seen. Everyone has a price. Name yours. The words hit her like physical blows. This isn't about money. Everything is about money. He clicked his pen, ready to write. 50 million won? 100 million? More. His eyes finally met hers, and they were dead. Abort it and disappear from my life. I'll make sure you never have to work again. Tears burned behind Aisha's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. This is your child. I can't have children. Minute's voice hardened. Not publicly. Not where they can be seen, targeted, used against me. Do you understand what you're asking? The moment this child exists, it becomes a liability. A weakness my enemies will exploit. You should have thought about that before you had unprotected sex with me. Aisha's voice rose despite her best efforts. I didn't plan this either. I didn't want to be pregnant by a stranger, but I am, and this baby deserves better than a father who treats it like a business problem. Something flickered in his eyes, pain, maybe, or regret, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. My assistant will bring you a check and paperwork. Sign the non-disclosure agreement. Get the procedure done. Send the medical bills to my office. You'll never see me again, and I'll make sure you're financially comfortable for life. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? He slammed his hands on the desk, making her jump. What could you possibly want from me besides money? I want you to care. The tears finally came, hot and humiliating. I want you to feel something about the fact that there's a life growing inside me that's half yours. I want you to be even a fraction of the man I met that night, the one who talked to me like I mattered, who held me like I was precious, who made me feel. Her voice broke. But that man doesn't exist, does he? He was just another lie. Minute's face remained impassive, but his hands clenched into fists on the desk. Get out. What? Get out. He pressed a button on his phone. Security will escort you downstairs with your check. Don't come back. Don't contact me. Don't tell anyone about this conversation. If you violate the NDA, I will destroy you. Do we understand each other? Aisha wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain radiating through her chest. Instead, she drew herself up with what little dignity she had left. I understand perfectly. You're a coward who hides behind money and threats because you're too afraid to be human. She turned and walked toward the doors on shaking legs. Behind her, she heard him exhale a sound that might have been pain or relief, she couldn't tell. The doors opened, and security materialized to flank her once again. If you'll come this way, one said, holding an envelope. I don't want it, Aisha said numbly. Mr. Khan insists. They rode the elevator down in silence. When the doors opened to the lobby, the security guard pressed the envelope into her hands and gestured toward the exit. Aisha walked through the sea of staring faces, out the glass doors, into Seoul's late afternoon rain. She didn't remember walking away from the building. Didn't remember how long she stood there as rain soaked through her dress and plastered her braids to her head. She only became aware of her surroundings when the envelope slipped from her numb fingers and landed in a puddle, the check inside dissolving into meaningless paper. Aisha sank to her knees on the wet pavement and sobbed. Not delicate tears, but ugly, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. This was really happening. She was pregnant and alone, and the father of her child had just paid her to erase their baby's existence. Why are you crying outside my son's building, child? The voice was gentle, cultured, concerned. Aisha looked up through her tears to see an older man with silver hair and kind eyes standing over her with an umbrella. He wore a suit as expensive as Minute-Who's, and his face had the same aristocratic features, aged with wisdom and something that looked like sadness. Aisha's voice came out as a croak. Your son. Khan Jae-sung. He offered his hand to help her up. And you are. Nobody. I'm nobody. But she took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. Nobody doesn't cry like that outside my company. His eyes moved to the dissolved check in the puddle, and understanding dawned. What did Minute-Who do? The kindness in his voice broke something in Aisha. The whole story poured out, meeting at the club, the night they shared, discovering she was pregnant, the humiliation upstairs. She told this stranger everything while rain poured down and his umbrella kept them both dry. Jae-sung's face darkened with each word. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, come with me. You shouldn't be alone right now. I can't. Please. His tone left no room for argument. Let me fix my son's mistakes. It's the least I can do. Too exhausted to protest, Aisha let him guide her to a waiting black Mercedes. The driver opened the door without question, and she slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her car. Jae-sung climbed in beside her and gave an address she didn't recognize. They drove in silence through Seoul's rain-slicked streets, leaving the city center behind for increasingly exclusive neighborhoods. Finally, they turned through gates that opened automatically, revealing a mansion that looked like something from a historical drama, traditional Korean architecture seamlessly blended with modern luxury. This is your home, Aisha whispered. The family estate. Minute-Who has his penthouse in the city, but this is where he grew up. Jae-sung helped her from the car. Where his mother and I raised him to be better than the man you met today. Inside, staff materialized to take wet coats and offer towels. Jae-sung led Aisha to a sitting room with a view of manicured gardens and koi ponds. A maid brought tea and disappeared silently. Tell me about yourself, Jae-sung said, settling into a chair across from her. Not about my son. About you. So Aisha told him. About growing up between two cultures, Nigerian and Korean. About her love of writing and her dream of creating stories that made people believe in love. About her small apartment and her two best friends and her quiet life that had been completely upended by one impulsive night. Jae-sung listened with the focus of someone who truly heard what others said. When she finished, he nodded slowly. You love this baby already, don't you? Even though it complicates everything. Aisha's hand moved instinctively to her still flat stomach. Yes. I don't know how it's possible to love something that's barely real yet, but I do. This baby is mine, and I'll protect it with everything I have, even if I have to do it alone. You remind me of my wife, Jae-sung said softly. She had that same fierce love. That same strength disguised as gentleness. He stood, decision made. Wait here. I need to have a conversation with my son. Mr. Khan, please. Call me Jae-sung. And don't worry. Minute-who needs to hear some hard truths, and I'm the only person he can't dismiss or pay off. He left, and Aisha sat alone in the beautiful room, wondering what she'd set in motion. Outside, the rain finally stopped, and the sun broke through clouds, painting everything gold. Minute-who was still in his office when his father burst through the doors without knocking. He looked up from his computer, irritation flashing across his face. I'm busy. You got an innocent woman pregnant and threw her away like garbage? Jae-sung's voice was quiet, but it cut like a blade. Minute-who's jaw tightened. You don't understand the situation. Then explain it to me. Jae-sung crossed his arms. Explain how my son, who I raised to treat women with respect, offered money to abort his own child. Explain how you could be so cruel to someone who did nothing wrong except trust you for one night. My enemies will use any weakness against you. Yes, I know. Jae-sung slammed his hand on the desk. You've used that excuse for years to avoid any real connection, any real relationship. But hiding from love doesn't make you strong, Minute-who. It makes you a coward. The word hung between them. Minute-who's hands clenched into fists. I watched them take Jae-hyun's wife. I watched them send him pieces of her until he gave them everything they wanted. I watched it destroy him. I won't let that happen to anyone I care about. So you care about no one? Jae-sung's voice softened slightly. That's not protection, son. That's prison. You've locked yourself away so thoroughly that you've forgotten how to be human. Better that than putting a target on someone innocent. She's already a target, Jae-sung shouted. The moment she walked into your building and announced her pregnancy, she painted a target on herself and your child. You can't undo that by throwing money at her and hoping she disappears. Your enemies will find out eventually. They always do. So the question isn't whether to protect her, it's how. Minute-who was silent, the truth of his father's words sinking in like poison. What do you want me to do? Jae-sung pulled papers from his jacket and placed them on the desk. New terms for your inheritance. You will marry Aisha Daniels within 1 week. You will care for her throughout the pregnancy and beyond. You will live with her as husband and wife. If you refuse, you lose everything, your trust fund, your CEO position, your place in this family. That's insane. Minute-who shot to his feet. You can't force me to marry someone. I can't force you to love her. But I can force you to take responsibility for your actions. Jae-sung's eyes were steel. You have until tomorrow to decide. Sign the papers or sign away everything your grandfather and I built. Your choice. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. She's downstairs, by the way. Aisha. She's in the sitting room, probably terrified of what you'll do next. If you have even a shred of the man I raised you to be, you'll go talk to her. Really talk to her. Not as Khan Minute-who, the untouchable heir. As the man who held her that night and made her feel safe enough to give him something precious. The door closed, leaving Minute-who alone with papers that would change his entire life. He picked them up with shaking hands, reading terms that felt like a noose tightening around his neck. Marriage. Cohabitation. Fidelity. Fatherhood. Everything he'd spent years avoiding, laid out in legal language. He thought about ignoring it, about choosing freedom over responsibility. But then he remembered the look in Aisha's eyes when he'd offered her money, the devastation, the betrayal, the death of whatever small hope she'd carried into his office. And he remembered how she'd felt in his arms that night, soft and trusting and real in a way nothing else in his life had ever been. If you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Minute-who found her in the sitting room where his father said she'd be, curled up in a chair that dwarfed her small frame. She changed into dry clothes. Someone must have provided a simple hanbok that made her look heartbreakingly young and vulnerable. Her eyes were closed, one hand resting protectively over her stomach, and for a moment he just watched her, this woman who'd crashed into his carefully controlled life and shattered all his defenses. Her eyes opened as if sensing his presence. For a heartbeat they just stared at each other, all the hurt and anger and confusion hanging between them like smoke. "I'm sorry," Minute said quietly. "For which part?" Aisha's voice was hoarse from crying. "For taking my virginity without knowing it. For getting me pregnant. Or for treating me like a prostitute you could pay off." Each accusation hit its mark. Minute moved closer but didn't sit, didn't want to crowd her. "All of it. I'm sorry for all of it. Your father wants you to marry me. I know. Is that why you're here? Because he threatened your inheritance?" She laughed bitterly. "I don't want to be married to someone who sees me as an obligation. What do you want?" The question was genuine this time, not the cold dismissal from his office. Aisha looked at him for a long moment. "I want my baby to have a father who wants them. I want to not be terrified about how I'm going to afford prenatal care and diapers and everything else a child needs. I want," her voice broke. "I want to matter to someone." Minute felt something crack in his chest at her words. He crossed the room and knelt beside her chair so they were eye level, so she could see his face when he spoke. "That night at the club, you were the first real thing I'd experienced in years. Everyone in my life wants something, money, connections, status. But you just wanted to talk. You saw through all the expensive clothes and the VIP section and saw me. Just me." His hand hovered near hers, not quite touching. "I've spent years building walls to keep people out because I've seen what happens when you love someone in my world. They become leverage. They become collateral. They die. So you're saying marrying me would put me in danger? You're already in danger. My father was right about that." Minute's jaw clenched. "The moment you announced your pregnancy in my lobby, you became a target. My enemies monitor everything that happens in that building. By now, they know about you. About the baby. The only question is how soon they'll move to use you against me." Aisha's hand moved protectively to her stomach. "Then what do? We make it impossible for them to touch you." He finally took her hand, felt her fingers tremble in his. "We get married. We announce the pregnancy as planned, as wanted. We present a united front so strong that attacking you would mean declaring war on the entire Khan family. It's not perfect, but it's the best protection I can offer. A business arrangement," Aisha said flatly. "That's what you're proposing?" "Yes." The word tasted like ash. "I can't promise love or romance or any of the things you write about in your books. I can't promise I'll be a good husband or father. But I can promise protection, resources, and that you'll never have to worry about money or safety again. What about the baby? Our child deserves more than parents who tolerate each other out of necessity. The baby will have everything money can buy. The best doctors, the best schools, every opportunity." Minute squeezed her hand. "And they'll have you. That's more than I ever had." There was such pain in those last words that Aisha's anger wavered. She thought about her options, raising a child alone in her tiny apartment, working multiple jobs to afford childcare, watching her baby grow up without a father. Or this. A loveless marriage to a man who terrified and intrigued her in equal measure, but a life where her child would want for nothing. "I need time to think. We don't have much time. My father wants an answer by tomorrow, and every hour we wait is another hour for our enemies to plan." Minute stood, releasing her hand. "Stay here tonight. The estate is secure, and you'll be safe. Tomorrow morning, give me your answer." He started to walk away, but Aisha's voice stopped him. "That man from the club. The one who listened to me talk about stories and dreams and made me feel like I was the only person in the world. Is he completely gone?" Minute looked back at her, and for just a moment, his mask slipped. She saw fear and longing and regret warring in his eyes. "I don't know. I hope not. But I can't promise you'll ever see him again." The honesty hurt worse than any lie could have. Aisha nodded, blinking back fresh tears. "Thank you for that, at least." He left, and she was alone again. A maid appeared to show her to a guest room that was easily twice the size of her apartment. The bed was enormous, the sheets softer than clouds, but Aisha couldn't sleep. She lay there staring at the ceiling, one hand on her belly, trying to imagine a future that made sense. Her phone buzzed with texts from Mina and Joy, frantic with worry since she'd disappeared hours ago. She texted back that she was safe but couldn't explain more yet. Their responses were immediate heart emojis and promises to come get her if she needed rescue. But did she need rescue? Or was this strange, cold arrangement exactly what she needed? Morning came too soon. Aisha dressed in her own clothes, dried and cleaned by staff she'd never seen. She found her way to a breakfast room where Minute and his father sat with newspapers and coffee. "Good morning," Jae-sung said warmly. "I hope you slept well." "Not really." Aisha took the seat a servant pulled out for her. A plate appeared with food she hadn't ordered, perfectly balanced, nutritious, exactly what a pregnant woman should eat. "You have my medical records." "We have everything," Minute said without looking up from his newspaper. "Blood type, allergies, family medical history. My security team is very thorough." The casual invasion of her privacy should have angered her, but Aisha was too tired to fight. "Of course you do. Have you made a decision?" Jae-sung asked gently. Aisha looked at Minute who finally lowered his paper to meet her gaze. His face was unreadable, showing nothing of the vulnerability from last night. This was the CEO, the heir, the man who controlled billions with the flick of a pen. "I have conditions," she said. "Name them." Minute leaned back in his chair. "First, I want my own space. Separate bedroom, separate wing if possible. I won't pretend to be in love with you, but I also won't be forced into intimacy I don't want." Agreed. "Second, I continue my writing career. I support myself. I'm not a kept woman who sits around spending your money." Also agreed. "Though I should warn you that being associated with the Khan family will change how people see your work. Third, when the baby is born, I have equal say in all parenting decisions. You don't get to overrule me just because you're rich." Something flickered in Minute eyes, surprise, maybe respect. "Fair." And finally Aisha's voice hardened. "If you cheat on me, this arrangement ends immediately. I won't be humiliated by a husband who parades mistresses around while I'm pregnant with his child. I deserve at least that much dignity." Minute's jaw tightened. "I don't cheat. Whatever else I am, I honor my commitments." "Then we have a deal." Aisha extended her hand across the table. Minute stared at it for a long moment before clasping it firmly. His hand was warm, strong, and the touch sent electricity up her arm that she tried desperately to ignore. "We get married in 3 days. Private ceremony, immediate family only. After that, we announce the pregnancy at the quarterly shareholder meeting next week." 3 days. Aisha's voice rose. "That's barely enough time to. There's no time for a big wedding. This needs to happen quickly, before our enemies can interfere." Minute released her hand. "My assistant will take you shopping for a dress today. Everything else is already arranged." "Of course it is." Aisha felt control slipping away already, her life being reorganized by forces she couldn't stop. Jae-sung had watched the entire exchange with something like satisfaction. "Welcome to the family, Aisha. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances, but I believe you'll be good for my son. He needs someone who isn't afraid to stand up to him." "I'm terrified of him," Aisha admitted. "But I'm more terrified of raising this baby alone." The next 3 days passed in a blur. Minute's assistant, a terrifyingly efficient woman named Ms. Park, swept Aisha through Seoul's most exclusive boutiques. The wedding dress she chose was simple, elegant, white but not virginal, that ship had sailed. She was fitted for clothes appropriate for a Chaebol wife, had her hair and makeup done by professionals who worked on Kdrama stars, and was coached on how to behave in public. "Never show too much emotion," Ms. Park instructed. "Smile politely but don't laugh too loudly. Answer questions about your writing but deflect personal inquiries. And never, ever discuss family business with outsiders." Aisha felt like she was learning to play a role in a production she hadn't auditioned for. Mina and Joy came to the estate despite Ms. Park's protests, and the three friends locked themselves in Aisha's room. "This is insane," Mina said, pacing. "You're marrying a man who tried to pay you off." "I know. A man who might actually be connected to organized crime," Joy added. "I know that too." "Then why are you doing this?" both friends demanded in unison. Aisha looked at them helplessly. "Because what's my alternative? Raise this baby alone while his father's enemies target me anyway? At least this way, I have protection. Resources. A chance to give my child a good life." "What about love?" Mina asked softly. "You write about love. Don't you deserve it? Maybe love is a luxury I can't afford right now." Aisha's hand moved to her stomach, where a tiny life was growing. "My baby's safety matters more than my romantic dreams." The wedding day arrived cold and grey. Aisha stood in front of a mirror in her white dress, looking at a stranger. The woman reflected back looked elegant, composed, nothing like the broke writer who'd stumbled out of a club 4 weeks ago. The ceremony was held in the estate's private chapel, officiated by a judge Jae-sung knew personally. Besides the judge, only Jae-sung, Ms. Park, Mina, and Joy were present. No music, no flowers, no celebration. Just legal words binding two people who barely knew each other. Minute, who wore a black suit that probably cost more than Aisha's car. He looked devastating and remote, like a statue of a groom rather than an actual man getting married. When the judge asked if he took Aisha as his wife, his "I do" was clear but emotionless. When it was Aisha's turn, she looked into Minute Who's dark eyes and tried to find the man from the club. But he was gone, hidden behind walls she didn't know how to breach. "I do," she whispered. "You may kiss the bride." Minute, who leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead, a gesture so chaste and distant it hurt more than no kiss at all. Aisha's eyes burned with unshed tears, but she smiled for the photographer who appeared from nowhere to document this farce of a wedding. They signed papers that made it legal. Aisha Daniels became Aisha Khan, and with the stroke of a pen, her entire life changed. The reception was even more depressing than the ceremony, a formal dinner in the estate's dining room with conversation so stilted it made Aisha want to scream. Minute, who sat at the head of the table, barely speaking, while Jae-sung tried to keep things pleasant. To the happy couple, Jae-sung toasted, though his eyes were sad. "May you find what you're looking for in each other." Aisha drank water while everyone else had champagne. The baby couldn't have alcohol, and she was grateful for the excuse to stay sober through this nightmare. After dinner, Ms. Park appeared to show Aisha to her new room, an entire wing of the mansion, as requested. It was beautiful, decorated in soft colors with a view of the gardens. A door connected to what Ms. Park explained was Minute Who's wing. "The door locks from both sides," Ms. Park said with professional neutrality. "Mr. Khan wanted you to feel secure." "Thank you." Aisha's voice was hollow. Ms. Park hesitated at the door. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Khan, I've worked for this family for 15 years. Minute Who isn't cruel. He's scared. There's a difference." She left before Aisha could respond. Alone in her beautiful prison, Aisha changed into pajamas and climbed into a bed big enough for 3 people. She felt the baby's presence like a warm glow in her abdomen, too early for movement, but she knew they were there. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her stomach. "I'm sorry your parents' love story is so broken. But I promise I'll love you enough for both of us." A sound from the other side of the connecting door made her freeze. Minute Who, moving around his room. She heard water running, drawers opening and closing, the sounds of him preparing for bed. Just inches of wood and lock separated them, but they might as well have been on different continents. Aisha rolled over, pulling the covers up to her chin. Tomorrow they'd announce the pregnancy to the shareholders. Tomorrow the world would know she was Minute Who's wife. Tomorrow her real life as Mrs. Khan would begin. She just hoped she'd survive it. Days turned into weeks in the Khan mansion, and Aisha discovered that luxury couldn't fill the emptiness of a loveless marriage. She and Minute Who lived like cordial strangers, polite at breakfast, separate during the day, silent at dinner. He went to the office early and came home late. She wrote in her room, pouring all her pain and confusion into her novel, transforming her reality into fiction. The shareholder announcement had gone as planned. Minute stood at a podium in his best suit and announced his marriage and impending fatherhood with all the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. The shareholders applauded politely, gossip columns exploded with speculation, and Aisha sat in the front row feeling like an exhibit in a museum. But the real torture started at night. The first time Aisha heard it, she thought she was imagining things. Female laughter from Minute's wing, too loud to be television. She pressed her ear to the connecting door and heard it clearly, a woman's voice, breathy and flirtatious, saying something that made Minute laugh. Then came sounds that made Aisha's stomach turn. Moaning. The rhythmic thump of a headboard hitting a wall. Gasps of pleasure that went on until Aisha covered her ears and sobbed into her pillow. He'd promised. No cheating. That was her one condition, and he'd agreed. But here he was, barely 2 weeks into their marriage, bringing women into his bedroom while his pregnant wife slept next door. It happened again 2 nights later. And 3 nights after that. Always different voices, different laughs, but the same devastating sounds that told Aisha exactly what her husband was doing while she lay alone. She wanted to confront him, but pride kept her silent. What could she say? They weren't in love. They barely knew each other. Maybe this was just how Chaebol marriages worked, separate lives, separate pleasures, united only by legal documents and shared children. But it hurt. God, it hurt more than she wanted to admit. Aisha poured everything into her writing. Her protagonist, a woman who'd entered a marriage of convenience, suffered the same indignities. But in the novel, the heroine fought back. She demanded answers. She refused to be treated like furniture in her own life. If only Aisha had that courage. 6 weeks into the marriage, Aisha woke at 2 in the morning with sharp cramping in her abdomen. She tried to ignore it, but the pain intensified. Then she felt wetness between her legs and threw back the covers to see blood staining her pajamas. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no, please no." She stumbled out of bed, legs shaking, and made it halfway to the door before another cramp doubled her over. She collapsed in the hallway, gasping in pain, one hand pressed to her stomach where her baby, please God, let the baby be okay, was fighting for survival. The connecting door to Minute's wing opened. A woman in expensive lingerie stepped out, froze when she saw Aisha crumpled on the floor, and screamed. Minute appeared behind her, shirtless, looking annoyed at the interruption. Then he saw Aisha. Saw the blood. And his entire demeanor transformed. "Get out," he barked at the woman, who grabbed her clothes and fled. Minute was at Aisha's side in seconds, scooping her into his arms with surprising gentleness. "Don't move. I've got you." "The baby," Aisha sobbed against his chest. "Please, the baby. Call Dr. Park," Minute shouted at someone, a servant who appeared from nowhere. "Tell her to meet us at Seoul Medical Center immediately. And bring the car around now." He carried Aisha down the stairs like she weighed nothing, his jaw clenched and his eyes focused. She'd never seen him look so intense, so present, so unlike the cold stranger she'd married. In the car, he held her hand, his thumb stroking her knuckles while the driver raced through empty Seoul streets. "You're going to be okay. Both of you. Do you hear me? You're both going to be fine. You care," Aisha said through her tears, the observation slipping out. Minute's grip on her hand tightened. "I've always cared. That's the problem." The words made no sense, but Aisha was too scared and in too much pain to parse them. She closed her eyes and prayed to every god she could name that her baby would survive this night. The hospital was ready for them. Dr. Park, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands, took charge immediately. Aisha was rushed to a private room, examined thoroughly while Minute paced outside like a caged animal. After an eternity that was probably only 30 minutes, Dr. Park emerged. "The baby is fine. A bit of spotting from implantation shifting, but nothing dangerous. However, Mrs. Khan needs complete bed rest for at least 2 weeks. No stress, no strenuous activity, and absolutely no emotional disturbances." Minute exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. "Can I see her?" "Of course. She's asking for you." He entered the room to find Aisha propped up on pillows, and 4 in her arm, looking small and fragile in the hospital bed. Her eyes were red from crying, but she managed a weak smile when she saw him. "The baby?" she asked immediately. "Fine. Dr. Park says everything is fine." Minute approached the bed slowly, like she might shatter if he moved too quickly. "You need to rest. I heard you. No stress, no emotional disturbances." Aisha's voice hardened. "So I guess you'll need to keep your affairs quieter. Wouldn't want your pregnant wife to be disturbed by the sounds of you screwing other women." Minute flinched like she'd slapped him. He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat, suddenly looking exhausted. "They're all fake." "What?" "Every woman you've heard. Every moan, every laugh, every sound. Paid actresses. I've been staging it all." Aisha stared at him, trying to process his words. "Why would you?" "Because if you loved me, they'd use you." Minute's voice was raw. "My enemies, the people who want to destroy my family, they'd target you. Kidnap you. Torture you. Use you as leverage until I gave them everything they wanted. I've seen it happen. My childhood friend Jinho, they took his wife. Sent him pieces of her, one by one, until he handed over his entire company. She survived, but she's never been the same. Neither has he." Tears gathered in Aisha's eyes, but she didn't interrupt. "I thought if you hated me, if you believed I was just another cheating bastard, you'd be safer. You'd keep your distance emotionally. You'd protect yourself." His laugh was bitter. "But watching you hurt every night, knowing I was causing that pain, it's been killing me." "That's the stupidest plan I've ever heard," Aisha said, echoing her own words from weeks ago. Minute's hand found hers on the bed. "I know. I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting you, but I was just being a coward. Too scared to be honest about my feelings because honesty makes you vulnerable." "What feelings?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and his mask crumbled completely. "That night at the club wasn't random for me. You were real in a world of people who only want to use me. And then I took something precious from you without even knowing it, and you still came to tell me about the baby instead of just disappearing. You're brave and honest and everything I've trained myself not to be." "You're saying you have feelings for me?" Aisha's heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm saying I married you because my father forced me, but I would have eventually chosen you anyway. I'm just too broken to know how to show it without hurting you." Minute lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "No more fake affairs. No more walls. I'm going to try to be the man you deserve, even though I'll probably fail spectacularly." A small laugh bubbled up from Aisha's chest despite everything. "That's possibly the worst romantic declaration ever. I warned you I'd be terrible at this." But he was smiling, a real smile that transformed his face into something beautiful and young. Aisha tugged his hand until he leaned closer. "Kiss me. A real kiss. Not whatever that forehead thing was at our wedding." Minute hesitated for only a heartbeat before his lips found hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, like he was afraid she might break. But then Aisha's hand came up to cup his face and he deepened the kiss, pouring all his fear and regret and hope into the connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Aisha whispered, "We have a lot to figure out." "Yeah." Minute rested his forehead against hers. "But maybe we can figure it out together instead of separately. Maybe." They stayed like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, hands clasped, the beginning of something real and fragile growing between them. Outside, dawn was breaking over Seoul, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. For the first time since their wedding, Aisha felt something that might have been hope. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. What do you think? Can Minute and Aisha make this marriage work? Will his enemies find them? And what happens when the baby arrives? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss part 2 of their story. Comment baby Min if you want to see what happens next. Trust me, things are about to get a lot more complicated. Until next time, this is the story of the heir's unwanted bride.